Enforcement Administration in the Department of Justice is the lead agency for the enforcement at the federal level of the Controlled Substance Act. But we also have a lead mission in the area of intelligence. We're responsible for providing intelligence to a variety of federal customers, including Customs, Coast Guard, Immigration Service, FBI, IRS, the military, state and local enforcement organizations, as well as foreign governments, generally through our DEA overseas office. To execute this role at the federal level, we formed a committee called the National Narcotics Intelligence Consumers Committee. This committee meets periodically to develop estimates of the drug situation in the United States, and the material I'll present to you today is a combination of the result of that estimate plus what we see as trends, so that you'll not only have the base as the committee has agreed, you'll have a projection of what we see happening in 1981 and in 1982. I'll proceed in the presentation by taking the drugs in the order that has been set in the federal strategy. First, heroin. Second, dangerous drugs. Third, cocaine. And fourth, marijuana. This chart shows the overall cultivation areas in the world with the different color codes representing the different drugs. I will speak in a few minutes to the opium cultivation that occurs in Southwest Asia, the area of Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. Southeast Asia, the so-called Golden Triangle represented in yellow, and Mexico, the area represented in brown, the three principal production areas in the world producing illicit drugs. I must also mention that in Turkey there is an illicit crop of poppy straw, which to this date we still feel that the Turkish government is controlling, as well as India, that has an illicit cultivation of over 1,000 tons per year. That illicit crop is used to produce morphine, which is used for pharmaceutical and medical purposes. I'll start by explaining what's happened in the United States as far as heroin availability on the streets at the retail level. This chart shows over the years the start at the 7.5 ton, and this is 100% pure 7.5 tons being imported and consumed in the United States in 1975. You see at this point, most of that heroin was of Mexican origin, or the yellow. Because the government of Mexico, with the assistance, financial and technical, of the United States government, including DEA's personnel in that country, initiated a crop eradication program. That program began to take hold, and as a result, the amount of Mexican heroin imported into the United States began to reduce through the 77, 78, and you see the small part in 1979 that is represented by Mexican heroin. You see the blue area, the Southeast Asian, generally holding pretty steady. There are some variations year to year. You see a new source, Southwest Asia, beginning to build, and now a major concern to us in the United States as far as a major supply of heroin. There are three factors that really affect the cultivation of opium in the world. And they're factors that affect the farmer in differing ways. One is weather, and a good example of weather is Southeast Asia, where weather has been the predominant factor in the amount of opium that was produced, and as a result, the amount that ended up being imported into the United States. This chart shows in the Golden Triangle in 1975, they had a good year as far as weather, and in 79 and 80, weather was a significant factor in holding down that crop. But you see, as a projection for 1981, we expect a bumper crop of around 600 tons. So weather is best illustrated as the predominant factor in the production of Southeast Asian heroin. Two other factors, though, also interplay in the decision the farmer makes in the cultivation of opium. One is price. Price for opium at his level. he has to sell the opium. He has to make a livelihood. And if opium prices are depressed, principally because of production the previous year, he may well go back to agricultural produce. So he has a decision to make, and part of that is anticipating the price he'll get for his crop. The other factor, the third factor, is the pressure he is likely to receive from the central government. The risk of the central government coming in, destroying his crop, arresting him, taking some kind of enforcement action. In Mexico, the chart illustrated how successful this was, the eradication program, so it was a major risk to the opium cultivator. But unfortunately in Southwest Asia and in Southeast Asia, the central governments are not able to take the same kind of action against the farmers, so that he sees little if any risk from the central government. So the first two factors, weather and the price, are the key determinants as to how much opium is going to be produced. You see what's happened in the three countries making up the Southwest Asian area, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and you can see that from 79 to 80 to 81, we have some significant production. But let me call your attention to 1979. You put these three figures together, and we had a crop of 1,600 tons produced in that area. Now, while a good part of that was consumed, both in the form of opium and also in the form of heroin hydrochloride in those three countries, a large part of that was exported, and some is stockpiled. But you can see in Pakistan, for instance, how much the drop was in 1980, and that's due to the fact that this overproduction, so to speak, caused the prices to go way down, and so the farmers in 1980 did not plant as much. And that trend is even continuing in 1981, because there still are stockpiles existing principally in Pakistan, to a lesser extent in Afghanistan and Iran. I must mention the last two countries are countries where we are denied access and we have a very limited database. Here's the illustration of the effect of the Mexican program that I mentioned earlier. You can see their cultivation in 75, but notice how it has been reduced year to year. In 1981, we expect to see an increase. That increase is due to, one, the fact that the weather is improving over what they've had the previous years. Second, as a reaction to government pressure, the farmers are planting in new areas of Mexico, over on the eastern coast, near Veracruz, and they're planting more fields but much smaller fields, which makes it harder for the helicopter herbicide eradication program to be effective. So we feel that as a result, there will be some increase in production in 1981. At the current time, we're in the process of putting the figures together in the NIC for 1980, but we do expect to see a slight increase in the overall importation and consumption in the United States in 1980, principally due to the increased portion of this bar chart represented by Southwest Asian heroin. In 1981, as this chart illustrates, for the Golden Triangle, we would expect to see an increase during the latter part of this year of Southeast Asian heroin in this country due to this extensive cultivation in Burma, Laos, and Thailand. To elaborate on a point that I made earlier with respect to Southwest Asian heroin, these charts illustrate the growth that's occurred in not only the production, the opium in these three countries, but also the routes that are used to move that opium and heroin hydrochloride both into Europe and into the United States. Most of the heroin consumed in Europe comes out of this area and is manufactured into heroin hydrochloride, either in this area or a large extent in the country of Turkey. It then flows through this route into Germany, to a lesser extent the other countries in Europe. And this chart shows the effect of that increased availability of heroin hydrochloride. You can see the seizures by our European counterparts continue to mount so that in 1980 they seized almost 1 ton of 100% pure equivalent heroin hydrochloride. You can see what the increased availability did with respect to death. The Federal Republic of Germany death rate, normalized per million, increased significantly through these years, and we now see this curve begin to level off. You note at the same time, our deaths were being reduced, again going back to the previous charts because of the success of the Mexican eradication program. Italy beginning to experience the same kind of increase in abuse statistics reflected by their deaths per million. But this chart is a vivid illustration of the price that our European friends are paying as a result of that new production that occurred in Southwest Asia. Most of the heroin that's coming into the United States from Southwest Asia comes through Italy along this path. Most of it coming into what we call the Northeast Corridor, imported into New York City. The production controlled, the syndicates in control of the importation are for the most part the Italian, Sicilian syndicate families, some of which we saw in the days of the French Connection, including a chemist who was recently arrested by the French, the Silver Fox. If you saw the movie The French Connection, an 82-year-old chemist arrested in a heroin production laboratory capable of producing over 50 kilograms of heroin a week, a very high purity heroin, a very sophisticated lab. But to again re-emphasize the point, most of the heroin being imported into the United States is coming from the Italian Connection, as opposed to that heroin being abused in the northern part of Europe, which is coming through the Turkish route. Within the United States, most of the abuse is centered in the Northeast Corridor. Washington, Baltimore, New York, Boston, Detroit, to a lesser extent Chicago, but we have even seen Southwest Asian heroin in Los Angeles and Phoenix. We feel that the success of our Italian, French counterparts in 1980 in seizing over 14 laboratories, largely based on DEA cooperation and intelligence, has helped affect the rate of increase, the kind of increase that this chart shown that Europe went through. We've not seen that tremendous rate of increase in the United States because they have successfully immobilized some of the major laboratories producing heroin in Europe. We feel there's also maybe a temporary phenomenon that unless that enforcement pressure is kept up, that we can see our importation rates begin to climb and a gradual move of Southwest Asian heroin across the country. Before leaving this chart, let me use it to point out how we expect to see Southeast Asian coming from the Far East enter probably in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and New York. Something that we expect to see late this summer and in the fall, and we really are going to be unable to predict because price is going to be a key determinant of how it's going to take its hold in the market in the United States and how that original chart will end up looking at the end of 1981. How much Southwest Asian, how much Southeast Asian, and how much Mexican heroin. A drug that we have recently seen in late 1979 to 1980 that will reflect in significant increases in this solid bar, or the foreign origin dangerous drugs. It's created by a drug called methoqualone, or as it's known in the streets of the United States, Quaalude. This chart will permit me to demonstrate how that drug production results. Methoqualone powder is produced principally by countries in Eastern Europe. Those flow through Western Europe into Colombia in a raw powder form in large drums that are imported generally through marine and commercial air terminals. And in Colombia exists the tableting press that produce the ROR 714 and many other forms of ballistic tables of that methoqualone tablet. Those tablets are then transported to the southeast part of the United States for the most part and then from that point go on into the rest of the United States, and the rate of increase of the methoxylin abuse in the southeast part of the United States is significant. The drug early warning statistics from Miami reflect the sharpest increase that system has shown to the abuse of methoxylin in the greater Miami area. While we don't expect to see that same significant rate of increase occur in other U.S. cities, it does show how quickly a new drug can be introduced into a market and be consumed and very quickly show up in our drug warning indicator system. The last two drugs are cocaine and marijuana. This chart shows how vividly the dollar value of those drugs can affect the United States, because in 1979, marijuana at the retail level amounted to almost $19 billion, and that's an average figure, one that we feel is conservative. Cocaine, $21.8 billion, but the combination, over $40 billion. And one of the key factors that's creating a problem principally in the southeastern part of the United States, centered in the Miami area. Cocaine is produced from the coca leaf grown in these portions of Colombia, Peru, Bolivia. Most of the production of the coca leaf results in these two countries. About half of the cocaine hydrochloride is produced in laboratories located in Colombia, so that the raw materials move from Peru into Colombia and also from Bolivia. But there also is direct importation from these countries into the United States. Our data for 1980 calendar year will reflect a significant increase in this figure, probably upwards of 40 tons total imported into the United States. And of course, this dollar figure will go up accordingly. Cocaine abuse continues to expand at a significant rate, and as a result, a significant number of dollars are being spent for abusing that drug. Marijuana, cultivated in 3 areas, foreign areas. Most of the drug, 70% roughly, cultivated in northern Colombia, Guajira Peninsula, the very northern coastline area, where it's exported from. Followed next by Jamaica, a country with growing cultivation, doubling from 79 to 80 in our preliminary estimates. Followed, distant third, by Mexico, because the Mexican government is extending that eradication campaign I mentioned earlier against the opium poppy to include marijuana. Their production of marijuana has dropped significantly. But this chart reflects the preliminary findings in the United States of what we're seeing with respect to domestic cultivation. Extensive cultivation exists in Northern California, Southern Oregon, Hawaii, Southern California, parts of the central United States, and probably to some small degree in almost every state in the United States of America. One fad that we noticed recently, and we feel that it will continue, so it'll be a major part of the cultivation, is the use of the hothouse, particularly in California. We're also seeing it in Kentucky and Tennessee. This is a covered cultivation area, much like a greenhouse, but not with the elaborate window framing system that a greenhouse would have. But that permits the cultivator to get 2 crops a year, and also permits him to control the cultivation so he gets the very high THC content sinsemilla. And that, we feel, has a significant effect, because most of the medical results that are showing the health hazards of marijuana today are based on the 1 to 2% marijuana from Mexico and Colombia, 1 to 2% THC. But the sinsemilla grown in Hawaii and Northern California, the THC content runs 6 to 7% and as high as 10%. It is a growing problem in the United States, and one which DEA and the state and locals are increasing their resources and their efforts to control that cultivation. But returning to a summary point for not only marijuana and cocaine, but the overall presentation, DEA, together with the IRS, Customs Service, and the FBI, is targeting a part of its resource against the assets being accrued by the violators, going against the purchases, the cash, the foreign bank accounts in Switzerland, the Caymans, what's happening with this money. So that we not only are working to incarcerate those involved with the importation and trafficking, we're trying to go after the assets they're accruing. And this chart again vividly displays how much money is tied up in just these two drugs alone. And the fact that we are giving priority, particularly in the southeast region of DEA, to the targeting of marijuana and cocaine traffickers. The presentation you've heard is not an optimistic one. Unfortunately, most of our indicators have turned around. Successes that we've seen in previous years are no longer there. But let me return to the basic reason for that. 90% of the drugs abused in the United States are produced abroad, in foreign countries. And if we don't pursue aggressively the international narcotics control programs, both enforcement programs and crop substitution programs, we will not be able to check the rate of increase that I've been able to present to you in this briefing. So we feel that that part of the program, together with the interdiction at our borders, the targeting and use of the Controlled Substances Act, including asset removals, must be a balanced approach to reduce the supply. In addition, there will be initiatives by the National Institute of Drug Abuse to further educate the public to reduce demand, because drug abuse in the United States is truly a demand-supply relationship. And returning to the point as a final conclusion, we don't work the problem overseas. The last place to work it is on the streets of the United States.